Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today, you have yours truly, and we're going to be talking about the hidden crisis in agriculture that no one's talking about. You're like, Tracy, which crisis? We have weather, we have lack of rain, too much rain, low commodity prices, we have high interest rates, we have high costs of inputs. Which crisis, Tracy? But I'm actually going to talk about something no one's talking about. Well, no one's talking about in quite this manner. The biggest crisis facing agriculture, the family farm, is fear. Fear? Yes, fear. And today's discussion is going to be centered around transition planning, one of the main focuses on the Impact Farming Show. As many of you know, if you've been tuning in, I've been doing some solo episodes and sharing a little bit of my story and my why behind the Impact Farming Show. But for those of you that have missed it, I am the founder and CEO of farmmarketer.com, one of Canada's leading ag media websites. And then 8 years ago, I launched the Impact Farming Show as a way to bring Canadian farmers, North America farmers, and worldwide farmers now, the people and ideas that will impact their farming operation. And mainly, I wanted to center the show around business and mental health. But deep down, my true why for starting the Impact Farming Show is transition planning, succession planning, whatever you want to call it. I have seen people near and dear to me. I think anybody in the agriculture community has heard the horror stories and good stories about succession planning. And I always said, well, the previous generation probably didn't have the tools that we do now. So we'll give them a pass on that. But heaven forbid, with all the information that we have at our fingertips, if we repeat the same mistakes. And I truly love business. I'm an entrepreneur, a business person. I love farming, and I wanted to marry those two main pillars together. So business, transition planning, and in particular, in the world of farming. So that is why I launched the Impact Farming Show. So I have been having guests on for 7 seasons, going on 8 years, 8 seasons in September. And we've covered a lot of transition planning. And throughout all those guest interviews, I have learned and formed a body of knowledge from these amazing guests and taken away from their experience. Then add that to what I have personally experienced in life, what I see happen in the farming community, the whispers that you hear, the stories that readers, listeners, viewers share. So I wanted to talk about transition planning with a bit of a different spin. The biggest crisis in agriculture is fear. And I know we all live with fear on a daily basis, even if we don't call it that. We fear that we don't get rain. We fear that we'll get too much rain. We fear that the commodity rates will drop. We'll fear this. That is the life of a farmer. But what I wanted to talk about is transition planning. We always hear farmers need to transition plan. But here is the crazy thing. I had a guest on, and he started working with farmers 30 years ago. And he said back then the stats were X about the number of farmers that didn't have a transition plan. And then fast forward to 30 years now, he said the stats are still the same. So we have all this information available, all these strategies. Why aren't farmers making progress on transition planning? And there's so many great coaches and experts and authors out there saying all the things, all the strategy, all the information. And a lot of them are also saying, hey, let's talk about communication. Let's talk about emotions. Because at the end of the day, whether we are farmers or people going to a skyscraper job in the city, we are all people peopling. But here's the more complicated thing: family business. You're working with family. That adds a whole nother layer, probably 10 layers of complication to being in business. So many of the guests that we have on truly speak to communication as what's going to move the needle for transition and succession planning. And I absolutely agree. Just we all know, whether we're farmers ourselves or know of the neighbor, all the dynamics that happen on the family farm. But what I'm going to say, and we're going to talk about a little bit deeper and different than anything I've heard discussed, is fear being the root of why farm founders and farm families get stuck in transition planning. So, as you know, I'm an entrepreneur. I launched Farm Marketer 17 years ago in the Impact Farming Show. And as a business person, you are always bumping up against what you don't know and fear and working with your mindset. One of my favorite quotes that I use is business is 80% psychology, so 80% mindset, 20% strategy. So I think that is safe to say that goes right over from business to transition planning. And I would say the technical experts would probably disagree with me because they would say their piece is important. We're all important in making and helping farmers move the needle on transition planning so their farm can continue on. But let's go with that. If farm families haven't been creating a transition plan and they know they need to do it and all the information's out there, we're going to probably guess that strategy is not the main thing. We could say time, but truthfully, they always say whatever is important to us, we will find the time to do. It's a truth that stings. So let's say that it is not strategy and it's not time. So let's go to psychology, mindset, and communication, the hard stuff. We are family members working together: mums, dads, sister, brother, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandchildren. So many different dynamics and so many different cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. So today I want to talk about three main things. The fact that a lot of transition planning, succession planning, from what I've experienced, from what I hear, from what our guests have shared, is a lot of that soft skills, they call it: mindset, psychology, communication. And then 20% is strategy. And then I'm going to talk about how fear shows up, because fear is not a common conversation that we talk about generally. If you listen to entrepreneurship podcasts, they'll start to talk about fear, money, fear of failure, fear of all the different fears that are out there. But it's not a super common conversation for agriculture. So I'm bringing a different spin. So look out, agriculture. I, as an entrepreneur myself, coach business owners and entrepreneurs about money and mindset and building a business. And in that space, the mainstream entrepreneurship, it is common to talk about fear and mindset and performance and all of these things. So I can't help but bring in that piece, because I feel we need to name the elephant in the room, as so many of our guests do. They talk about the communication, they talk about procrastination, all of these things. But at the very root of it, I think it is the most human issue, human problem out there: fear. I think farm founders all have great intentions, I'd imagine, of passing the farm on, but they get stuck in fear. What are their fears? We're going to go into that in a little bit here. But I think we truly freeze up when we fear something and then procrastinate as the easier alternative to doing something and making a mistake, doing something, admitting we don't know, doing something and causing conflict. So, number one, I wanted to share is that mind blowing quote by Tony Robbins: business is 80% psychology, 20% strategy. I think if we remember that in farming and dealing with our farm family members, that is important, right? We farm, we know to plant, we know to do all the things that we need to do to produce our product. But I think we can all admit the hard stuff is the communication. And if we are not communicating, we're not being clear. And I love Elaine Fraser's quote, clarity is kindness, especially when farm founders are working with the next generation that would love nothing more than to take over the family farm. But there's no conversation happening and they see their future just slipping away or they're frozen in fear. What's happening? So, number one, business, family farming business is 80% psychology, 20% strategy. Let's call it the business part of it. Of course, producing our crops and producing our animals, that is strategy, technique, all of those things. Number two, because the conversation of fear is very odd to be bringing up in agriculture, I want to share fear's evil cousins, how fear shows up. Because nobody really names the true emotion. Fear is the underlying emotion that we feel as humans, right? We feel all the great and amazing emotions. And of course, fear is good because it keeps us safe, the survival mechanism. But here are some of the most common ways that fear shows up in our family members. I think this is an important conversation as part two. And then I'm actually going to move through a list of fears for each of the farm family member and share some of the different fears and concerns I've heard from our guests that have been on that I know and that I've heard people talk about, and what just makes sense as that person operating in the farm family. So, if you are generation two and you want to take over the family farm, but dad, and again, I'm going to be very stereotypical in this conversation because it's hard to flip flop the different roles. So if your mom is the farmer and your dad is off farm, then just substitute that as I speak about it. But I think majority of the farm families and where we're at with transition and the dynamics, majority of the farms are stereotypical. So dad's a farmer, mom's the farm, mom off farm career, takes care of the farm, the children, all of those roles. Gen 2, let's say it's a son that's farming, daughter-in-law, and then the off farm children. So forgive me, I got to be stereotypical for the ease of discussing the material. So let's say you are the farming child and you want to take over the family farm. You really do. You want to be that third, fourth, fifth generation to carry the name, to carry on the family farming tradition. But you bring it up to dad, you bring it up to mom, and XYZ happens. So we don't often talk to our parents and see fear. You don't. We often cover those emotions with another emotion, right? Because fear is very vulnerable. But I think this conversation is so deeply important because if we're not moving the needle on transition planning with all the facts, figures, information, podcasts, newspaper, YouTube channels, If it's not facts and figures, it's obviously the feelings and the peopling part. And if we can't get to the root of the problem, we can't get it out there, we can't figure out the issue, we can't communicate about it, and we can't find the solution. So I'm doing the very, very, probably most vulnerable conversation I will ever have on this channel in hopes that it will help the different generations bridge the gap. I'm sure mom and dad want to pass the farm on to you, but they have concerns. And because they are the adult, they want to know and appear like they have the answers. So instead of saying, I don't know, and then finding help, they say, I don't know in my head, and they brush it off and they go to the field because there's always something to do on the farm. So I think getting to the very root of this conversation, like the sliver in the skin, if you just put a band-aid over it, it ain't going to get any better. It's just going to get irritated. Let's get to the sliver. Farm girl Tracy here. So what are some of the ways that fear shows up in the individuals we love? Well, doubt, anxiety, concern, avoidance, anger, procrastination. I think those last three are key. So if you approach mom and dad about buying the farm and you get avoidance, anger, or procrastination, those are three symptoms of fear. So why are they doing it? They're getting mad, they're getting angry because they feel cornered. They probably don't have the answer and they're feeling stuck. Are they avoiding it? Well, one personality will lean on anger because that's their personality. The next, because of who they are and their personality type, will go with avoidance, right? Because they don't want to cause conflict. Where the next one's okay with conflict or feels cornered and just explodes. So anger, avoidance, and then procrastination. If nothing's happening, chances are there is unknown variables there, and the farm founders don't have the answer, or they have an answer that you're not going to like and they don't want to give it to you because they don't want to cause conflict. Probably not the situation, but let's get that all out there. I'm going to assume they have a handful of really strong concerns and they don't want to bring it up because, again, they're the parents. They want to seem like they know what they're doing. And it's human nature to avoid uncomfortable stuff that you don't have answers for, right? So let's go over those again. Doubt, avoidance, anger, procrastination. Those are all really symptoms of fear. And we know, love, respect our parents, and we can trust that they are trying to do the best that they can do with what they know, what they have at that given time. So I think that's one of the main reasons that transition planning doesn't happen, from what I've seen, from what I hear, from what I experience. And then what happens if the leader doesn't have the answer, they resort to those behaviors. Not always. We have the shining stars that transition perfectly, but that's not what we're talking about here. If they go to anger, avoidance, procrastination, and nothing comes from the outside, we're going to repeat the same cycle over and over for a year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 year. And meanwhile, if you're generation two and this is your career and your livelihood, you're sitting here going, tick tock, tick tock, time slipping away. Isn't that the truth? We all get a limited amount of time. And who wants to be locked in a vicious cycle of wanting to take over the family farm? I'm not saying getting it free. I'm just saying buying it, whatever it is. We don't want to be stuck in a vicious cycle, wasting our time away in silence, avoidance, procrastination. And then what happens is resentment. Isn't that the truth? this is a deep conversation, but I'm just going there. And truthfully, I've had quite a few people reach out privately and thank me for having these hard conversations and just really ripping the band-aid off, opening that can of worms, because I think it needs to happen. If we can't see something for what it is, we'll be missing the mark too. And I know at different stages in my life, you don't know. And you're only this mature with this information. So you can't always see that maybe what your parents are experiencing is fear when they blow up at you and get angry. They're not angry at you. They're feeling fearful. They don't know how to handle the situation, so they get angry. Any psychologists in the audience, please jump in if you need to. But this has been my experience studying psychology, working with farm families, personal life experience, not with my family, but just different people in the world. It's not hard to piece it together. Again, farm founders have the best intention. They're doing the best that they can with what they have at that moment, whether you like it or not. But my goal is to, like I said, take that band-aid off so you can be like, oh, I didn't think that my parents were fearful. And that's why they were getting angry or avoiding the subject. I thought they just had the answer and they were going to tell me when they were good and ready. And I thought I was just annoying them. Could it be that they don't know what to do? And that if them or myself doesn't provide new information, we're going to continue to go around and around in a vicious circle and nobody will ever accomplish their goals. Very well. Very well could be. So let's go through some of the feelings and fears that each of the family members can be feeling. So if I miss any of them and you want to add to them, please drop a note in the comments, send a message in our inboxes on social media. I would love to hear from you because I'm trying to compile this information so that everybody can win, right? It's not hard. It's pretty simple, but it's not easy. There's a lot of peopling, a lot of emotions, and a lot of information that different parties need. So let's be stereotypical and look at farm founder dad. What is he feeling? What are his concerns? Well, control. When you build a farming operation or a business, it literally becomes part of your identity. And yes, they say that's not healthy, but truly at the end of the day, I don't care what they say. We do need to have a life and we need to put business in perspective. But I think one of the things that set business owners apart is your ability to love, be all in, be passionate about the farm. Because if you weren't, you would probably quit it like a day job. You gotta love it. It's gotta be in your DNA. That to me is what gives farmers the stickability to do the hard work that they do with all the variables, all the mental stress, all the financial stress. You gotta love it. It literally needs to be part of your identity. And I know there are going to be coaches going, Tracy, that's so wrong. That's the opposite of what we tell people. And of course, we need family, we need community, we need to not tie our identity to the farm because if something happens, we go down mentally with the farm. And I get that. But flipping, I think what gives farmers the grit to persevere is the love, the passion, and assuming the identity of the farmer so that you have that stickability. So now when they want to transition the farm, and they truly, deep down, they do want to, but that really brushes right up against their control, their identity. They built it. They're not ready to go because who's ever ready to retire? they're going to be at war with the fact that they want their child to take over. But what about me? And that is a very hard feeling, an obstacle to overcome. And I think opening that dialogue up. I'm a business owner. I created a media company. I have a farm. Both are deeply entrenched in my identity. I take pride. That's what gives me grit to do the hard work on both of these businesses, come good times or bad times. Now, if somebody was saying, okay, you need to retire, well, who am I? Who am I without the farm? Who am I without Farm Marketer in the Impact Farming Show? This is a big identity crisis, right? So let's start with control. Number one, I built this and I want to run it till the day I die. Oh, but wait a minute. If I want the next generation to do that, I'm going to have to give up the reins at some point. Number two, losing their livelihood. So, okay, our son or daughter or children take over. What am I going to do? I'm 70. I feel like I'm getting going, right? Because we only have so many years in our farming career. And hopefully, if we're paying on debt, it's getting better and better. And you just feel like you're getting the knowledge and hitting the sweet spot. And then you got to give up the reins. I can imagine that feels very hard for farm founders. So there's the control. There's what are they going to do? Losing their livelihood. Do they still have a role on the farm or are they retired? Do they have things to do to keep them busy? That's going to be a big concern. Number three, how am I going to make money? Many of them might have this idea that they're just given the whole farm. But wait a minute, the farm pays for our living. If we give the farm or we do this, we're not going to have any money. Well, of course, you need to figure out a way for the farm founders to retire with income. And there's several ways to do that. I won't get into it today. We're just talking about the can of worms and everybody's fear on the farm. How do they get income for retirement? I'm going to imagine that most farm founders don't know the answer to that. And that is what causes them to freeze up. It's like, wait a minute, if the kids come in, they get the income. I sell the farm. Okay, so I sell the farm, I get money, but then the tax implication, that's where you speak to an expert. But if you have these concerns in your farm founder, they are legit, but there are people to help. Don't let it hold you up. So control, losing livelihood, how am I going to make money? Now, what's my purpose? I have farmed all my life. I've poured my blood, sweat, and tears, all of them, literally and physically, into the farm. Now what? What is my point? Do I get to come to the farm and help? Or am I just supposed to go off and retire? What is my purpose? By having something that excites you after the farm or having a role on the farm in retirement will help farm founders feel like they have a purpose and not feel massive amounts of fear of the unknown. All they've done is farm, right? Fair and equal. So mom and dad both, I would assume this is a big one. Fair and equal. So we need to transition the farm to the farming child or children, but there's non-farming children. How do we do this? The farm needs all of the land to function, all of the animals to function, but there's non-farming children. All our wealth is in the farm. So how do we take care of the non-farming children? Again, I won't get into that, and I am not the technical expert here. I am just the show host, messenger, and the gal that likes to come in here and really summarize what I see happening and some of the gold nuggets from our audience that they share. So fair and equal. I think that is really one of the big ones. And if you're a farm founder wondering about that, there's ways to handle that. So many ways. And just talk to a farm transition coach, specialist, and they can help you. If you're looking for somebody, You might need to do a little bit of work, but in Canada, there's an association called CAFA, the Canadian Association of Farm Advisors. If you go to their website, there are different types of advisors, lawyers, accountants, coaches, etc., by province. You might need to do some digging or ask a neighbor that maybe did a successful transition plan with a coach. Look around. It's a pretty small community. Chances are you can find somebody to help you spearhead these efforts and answer the question, how do I continue my farm on and let the farm children farm, and take care of the non-farming children? Here's a concern that is out there, but not often said, because who wants to say that and express that to your kids? Farm founders are concerned that their kids are going to run the farm into the ground. They spent all their life building this farm, getting all the experience, riding the highs and the lows and making the mistakes. Now they're going to hand the keys over to a very financially tricky type of operation, farming, where cash flow is a huge thing and markets and so many variables. It is challenging. So I assume farm founders have fear that their children don't know what they're doing and that they are going to run it into the ground. They're going to lose the farm, lose the land, or maybe even sell it all. What kind of ideas do farm founders think? In lack of clear communication, sometimes as humans, we make up stories and they're not always nice, right? So that is a fear. I want to pass the farm on, but the kids are going to run it into the ground. Well, maybe that's a coaching, a mentoring, schooling. Maybe that's a timing thing. You don't want to put the burden of taking over the farm on a farm kid that's too young. Do they have the experience? Have they farmed with you? Do they work on the financials with you? Do they know the ups and the downs of business plan? That's where in traditional business, you have managers and mentors and business courses. So that can help. And here's another concern I hear people speak about, and farm family coaches like Elaine. I think she's mentioned this, but different people. When you retire, now all of a sudden, instead of being empty nesters, you're empty farmers. You don't have the farm to keep you occupied. So now it changes the relationship dynamic with farm founder mom, farm founder dad. What are they going to do in retirement? What does that look like? That's a lot of time spent together, whether that's farming couples or non-farming couples. That's the same as empty nesters. That is a huge issue. So is farm founder dad thinking, feeling, concerned, fearing any of these items I just mentioned? Farm mom, I'd imagine a lot of the ones I discussed, but here's her concerns. And stereotypical. You might have farm mom that is the farmer. And as I said at the beginning, just switch the roles here, switch the mom and dad. But farm mom, let's retire already. Let's do something different. It is time. We've done this for 30, 40, 50 years. Let's do something else. I want to travel. I want to live off farm. I don't want to take care of the farmyard anymore. Here are all these different things that apply to different farm moms differently. And then on the flip side, she wants to retire, but maybe she doesn't want to lose the security of the farm, just the same as farm dad. How are they going to live? How are they going to retire? How are they going to afford to travel? And a big one, I don't want to lose the homestead. I've put so much time into this house. This house is mine. I just finally renovated it and now I got to move out. These are all concerns that farm moms experience. Harmony among the kids, which usually comes down to fair and equal. She wants the elephant in the room addressed so that she can find harmony so that everybody can get along and sit down at Christmas together, right? Farm kid, am I ever going to own the farm? And am I wasting my time? security. I'm spending 10, 5, 10, 15, 20 years on the farm. These are my main working years. I'm not building up equity or assets if I don't own any animals or land. I'm not building up credit. I'm not building up a retirement fund from a job. And also, if this doesn't work out, I've just missed out on 5, 10, 15, 20 years of my career from 30 to 50. Those are big years. So when the farm kid wants clarity, and again, I'm always like, we're not asking. To me, um, to me, we're like many of the coaches say, we're not expecting, we're not going with hands out entitlement. To me, it would be buying some of the land, whatever the case is. Again, talk to a transition planning expert. But when the farming kid wants to invest, they want skin in the game. That is why their main years, their career years, are being poured into the farm that they don't have ownership, equity in. And they're also helping the farm founders build the farming asset without getting any of that ownership. So if they work for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and then the farm gets split equally, what has been said for that period of time? And I think a lot of farm kids are concerned about that, rightfully so, right? When you go to a career, you're building into your retirement plan, you're working up in wage, you're getting more comfortable. If they're investing all that lifeblood into the family farm, they want to know what the light at the end of the tunnel is. What's the plan? Can I afford to buy this? Will I have to farm with my siblings? How is this going to work? Again, Elaine's main saying, one of her beautiful sayings that I love, clarity is kindness. If farm founders just want to sell the farm and give it all to charity, that is totally up to them. If they want to sell the farm, split it equally, so be it. If they want to pass on the farm to the farming children and have insurance for the non-farming children, whatever it is, that is the farm founder's prerogative. But clarity is kindness because we don't get time back, right? If a farm kid spends those years pouring their life force into the farm, they hope that it's with a payoff, right? Daughter-in-law, I guess son-in-law as well, right? Either or. But the in-law, I imagine they are feeling all the same frustrations as their spouse. Also, they're going to feel the added frustration of feeling the emotions of their spouse. So if their spouse is frustrated because the conversation about transition is being ignored, guess what? The in-law, daughter-in-law, son-in-law, they are the shoulder, the ear that gets to hear that. So they get frustrated if their spouse is not being heard, if their spouse is being disrespected, if they're being taken for granted, if their conversation about buying the farm is being ignored. The spouse is there to naturally have the farm kids back. So they're feeling all those things and watching their spouse struggle. And nobody likes that, right? And I would like to add a final one would be what happens to me if something happens to the farm kid? We may be living on a farm that is all owned by the farm founders. We might be in an extra house that is owned by the farm. What happens if something horrible happened to the farming kid and the daughter-in-law or son-in-law was left to fend for themselves and take care of the kids? Do they get to stay in that house? Where does their income come from? So that is an extra level of stress and concern from the daughter-in-law or son-in-law. those are some of the things that I have gathered to provide food for thought, opening the can of worms, but also we're all peopling, and that is not always an easy thing to do. My goal here on the Impact Farming Show is to help bring you guys the experts, the information, so that we can have the tools and the knowledge to know what to do, so that we can keep our family farms going, so that farm founders win, so that farming kids win, so that off-farm children win, so that mainly the family farm can continue on. One of the things that I would like to add, my biggest fear for our industry is the fear itself. If we're not having these conversations and not ripping off the band-aid, we're going to end up not doing the transition planning. And if we don't do it proactively before we pass on, it happens after. And chances are, if it's not planned, the family farm won't survive. And I know you, me, anybody in the audience here, we love family farms. We love farming. We love the freedom. We don't maybe necessarily love the stress, but we love the way of life, the lessons, the beauty, the animals, the land, the stewardship, the incredible blessing that being a farmer is. We love that. I love that as a farmer and as a media person, as a podcaster. I created this platform to give farmers the people and ideas that'll impact their farming operation. And at the heart of it, at the root of it all, is transition planning. Because I think the crisis that agriculture is going to face as the farm founders, the boomer generation, they move on to retirement very quickly here. By 2033, 60% of farmers will be over the age of 65. Right now, as it sits in Canada, 88% of Canadian farmers don't have a formal succession plan. That is alarming. That is a lot of farmland, farm assets, animals, future farms just hanging in the limbo. No plan, no continuation, and I would hate to see generations and generations of legacy destroyed because of fear at the root. Whether we want to call that fear or not, we can call it whatever we want, but it takes an incredibly open-minded, big person to step out of the I'm the farmer, I'm the owner role to bring in the next generation and steward that mentorship, that ownership. It's hard among the financial concerns, the physical demands of farming. But my hope is that we can all start to tackle transition succession planning so that we can have family farms. Because we all like to complain that the big farms and corporations and Bill Gates are eating up all the land. But at the root of it is the farm founder and the one selling the land. Why are they selling? If we have a strong plan to let the next generation continue on and maintain relationships in that farm family, well, then the family farm will continue on. So my fear is that fear is going to get the best of our industry, and that slowly and surely, year by year, as the boomers, as the farm founder generation retires, the dominoes of independent owned farms are going to fall. And as we all know, once that opportunity is gone, it is going to be hard, if not impossible, for the next generation to try and get back into farming. Once that family farm is gone, once that land is sold, it is just going to be, I love to be an optimist, but how hard would it be if you skip a generation for that next generation to try and come back and get the family farm going again? Let's not test it. let's get into succession planning, transition planning, and embrace this like our farm depends on it, because it truly does. What a incredible gift it would be to see your farm continue on another generation, right? I think that's what we all want. It's just there's a lot of fear that comes in between us and the doing and the learning of what needs to be done and learned so that we can properly pass the farm on to the next generation. So, those were my main things I wanted to talk to you about. The premises, the thesis, the idea that transition planning is 80% psychology, 20% strategy. Experts, you can write me hate mail if you want to, but I do believe if it's not that, exploring the conversation, that the people element, that the fear, that all of these concerns exist, and that if we can't get to the root of them, we're not going to move people to do what needs to be done to transition the farm. That is my feeling. That is what I hear. So, business transition planning, 80% mindset, psychology, communication, dealing with the emotions, 20% strategy. How fear shows up, avoidance, anger, procrastination, depending on the person we're dealing with and how they express their emotion of fear. The fears that each of the farm family members carry, farm founder dad, farm founder mom, the farming kid, the daughter-in-law or son-in-law, again, flip-flop if it's a different gender. And then we didn't even discuss, that is one I forgot to note, is the off-farm kids. They are not part of the farm, but there's a big discussion. Well, why shouldn't they get their equal share? They are a kid just the same as the farming kid. I'll leave that there. I am doing a lot of episodes on fair and equal because I do believe that is the big domino. Fear and fair and equal. I think those, in my humble opinion, I am new to this game, 8 years and then longer in business and dealing with farming communities and family and friends that farm, observing this, but that is my humble opinion. I think the two big dominoes are fear and fair and equal. I think if you can conquer those dominoes and they fall, that's not a good action, but you get what I mean. If we can tackle the fear and then the fair and equal dominoes, obstacles, I think the rest of transition frees up and becomes a little bit easier. And again, I think the off-farm kids, their second concern is they love the farm. If the farm gets sold to another child, can they still visit the farm? Isn't that a concern that they're going to have? Hopefully they get along with that sibling. I mean, that's obviously the make or break. But I assume most off-farm kids, nobody wants to be gimme, the conversation about inheritance. I just think that's, I'll leave it at that. And I think most kids would say, Mom and Dad, do what's best. Let's continue the farm, whatever that is. But everybody is human doing their part. And I think for off-farm kids, their concern would be not having access to the farm they grew up on and love. Even though they went off and started a career, they love the farm, or some hate the farm and leave, but majority of them love it and remember it fondly and would like to visit. So when the farm gets passed on to the next generation, do they get access? What happens to those memories, to their ability to visit the farm, right? So that is farm founder, dad, mom, farming kid, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, and off-farm children. I hope this discussion has been helpful. This is a lot of information I've gathered, like I said, from all the amazing guests that have so much experience and information working with farm families on transition plans. I just wanted to really pull that together and rip the Band-Aid off on this very honest conversation. I hope it's going to resonate. This is very left field for what I've been hearing in agriculture, but I'm bringing in some of my entrepreneurship, money, small business owner coaching and going, wait a minute, I see the same patterns. People are people, no matter what we do for a living. Why aren't we talking about fear as one of the biggest crisis points in agriculture? If we don't address these fears, farms won't get transitioned, and slowly farm family will slip away. Family farms will slip away. That has been a lot. I hope this has been helpful. I am curious to hear your thoughts. Did I miss any concerns on any of the roles? Does this resonate? Is this too far out there for agriculture? I hope not. I think this is a conversation that needs to be had in a way that is sensitive, because we are all people doing the best that we know how with the information and resources that we have at the time, right? It's true of the farm founders, of the farm kids, the in-laws, the off-farm kids. Everybody is doing the best that they can with what they know and what they have at the moment. I thought that was a good one when I heard that. That was incredibly eye-opening. So I hope this has been helpful. I truly do love talking about transition planning, bringing you people ideas, summarizing what I've learned, sharing some of my ideas that I think might help move the needle. So I would love to hear from you, whether it's in the comments or send me a quick message with your thoughts, feedback, thumbs up, or thumbs down if you didn't like this episode. I won't be hurt. I would just absolutely love to hear if this has resonated with you, if this is what is happening on your family farm. So I will see you next time. In the meantime, enjoy the beautiful summer, enjoy the family farm, and I'll see you in next week's episode. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.